This video is all about the importance of guitar parts and coming up with guitar parts that are interesting and that enhance the song in some kind of a way. It's such an important skill to develop. It's something I'm doing all the time, and I think if you're in a band, you're very commonly in the kind of situation where maybe the lead singer comes in with the basics of a song, and then as a band you need to flesh out those basic ideas and come up with some interesting stuff. Maybe you're in a recording session, you're very often faced with a track you've never heard before, and you just have to come up with something cool over the top of that. Or perhaps you're a songwriter yourself and you want to be able to come up with parts to make your songs sound more interesting when you're recording them. And the idea today is I'm going to try and come up with 10 guitar parts over the same backing track. So it's kind of an invention test for me, I suppose, and I'm going to try and explore some different styles, some different approaches. And the point of this is to give you some ideas and inspiration for coming up with interesting guitar parts of your own. Let's start with the backing track that I'm going to be playing over today. It sounds like this. And you can hear it's got quite a nice feel, some reasonably interesting chords there. It could perhaps be the verse part to a song. It's not a song yet. Maybe I should write a song over these chords. Maybe you could write a song over these chords. You're welcome to steal the chords if you like them. And at the moment it's just got bass, drums, there's some fairly basic strummy acoustic guitar, and what I want to do is to come up with some nice supporting electric guitar parts. Before you can start coming up with guitar parts, the most important thing to do is to really get familiar with the harmony, with the chords you're going to be playing over. You might want to do a bit of an analysis of the chords. You might even want to write out a quick chord chart for yourself. And the chords that I'm playing over today, it's starting on in the key of E major, but it's starting on an F sharp minor, going to E, and then that just repeats F sharp minor to E, then we're going to A, then we've got this kind of sound, which is I suppose it's kind of an E with a G sharp in the bass, so it's an inversion that we've got here, and then going to a G major, and then it all repeats again. So I say in the key of E major, if I were to do a kind of analysis of the way the chords are functioning there, it's all diatonic to the key of E major, meaning all of those chords belong to the key apart from the last chord. So we're actually starting on the 2 chord, the F sharp minor, to 1, 2 to 1 again. The A chord is the 4 chord. Then we've got this E with a G sharp in the bass, so it's really just an inversion, first inversion of an E chord, so that's really the 1 chord with its 3rd in the bass. Then this is the 1 chord to perhaps watch out for. This is a non-diatonic chord. It's not in the key of E major, but it's quite a common sound. It's just a flat 3 major chord. To me, it's got a little bit of a bluesy sound whenever you hear that chord in a major chord progression. You've got that, and then there's just a quick A before the progression, and it goes round again. You could maybe have a double verse, or maybe after that it would go somewhere else and into the chorus of this song. So let me do some playing, and here I'm kind of imagining that I'm in some kind of recording session and a producer or an artist has got this track together, and I've just been called in to come up with some guitar parts over the top of it. Or maybe it's like being in a rehearsal with a band and the lead singer has just come in with this new song, says, hey guys, listen to my amazing new song, what are we going to do with it? And then you're kind of put on the spot and need to do some cool stuff. And obviously here I'm somewhat limited by the fact that it's a fixed backing track, it's a fixed tempo and feel, and in a real situation there might be an option to change the feel of the track, particularly if you're in a rehearsal with a band. You might be able to say, well, maybe this tempo's not working, maybe we could do it at a different speed, maybe you could change the feel of the drums. But even in this situation where it's a fixed track, I hope you'll see that there are still loads of possibilities when it comes to different guitar parts with different approaches and different styles. Let's start simple, and often the best guitar parts are very simple, and my first thoughts playing over a track like this might be, well, the acoustic player is just holding down the basic harmony, doing some simple strumming, so maybe I can find some other ways of playing those chords, maybe in a slightly higher register, maybe something using some triad shapes. So this is something that I might come up with. just had a very simple part played using triads on the top 3 strings, and just really outlining the basic chords. So I just started with an A triad, going to an E triad like that, and then it was E, A, and then G at the end. Very simple shapes. And then I thought I'd sort of make it a bit more rhythmic, because the acoustic guitar player is just doing this continuous strumming thing. I thought I'd have some kind of rhythmic accents. So I was playing this kind of thing: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. So playing on 2 and the and of 3, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3, and then just taking that through the chord progression. You can experiment with different triad voicings. There are various different ways you can play these triads. If you watched any of my triad videos, you will have learned these different triad inversions and appreciate how useful they can be. So I think in the second time through the chord progression, I just ventured a little bit higher up the neck and used some slightly different voicings. I'm going to go a little bit busier now and try something in more of a soul R&B type style. Imagine what someone like Steve Cropper might play against this chord progression. And obviously when you're putting together your guitar parts, how busy you go is a really important consideration. And with a song, you've got to be really careful that you're not stepping on top of what the vocalist is doing. On this backing track, obviously there are no vocals, so I can perhaps go a little bit busier, but were there vocals in there, I would probably choose to go busy around the vocal phrases rather than getting in the way of the vocal melody. So let me play and see what happens with this one. So I started off with that classic soul device, these sliding fourths. That always sounds really good. I had some sixths in there as well, so and then I think I finished off with some stuff a little bit higher up the neck. So these kind of double stops with hammer-ons, a very classic R&B sound. Just thinking out of chord shapes here. So over the A chord, over E, and then over the G. I might try and develop that sound a little bit further and go for something perhaps a bit looser, a bit more Hendrix-y sounding. I think when you're coming up with guitar parts, sometimes it's useful to think in terms of other players, Steve Cropper, Jimi Hendrix, whoever it might be. Obviously you're not going to end up playing exactly what they would play or play exactly in their style, but it can be a really useful reference point. Also when you're communicating with other people, if you're communicating with a producer or other people in a band, often it's kind of convenient shorthand. Can you play something that's a bit Hendrix-y, and kind of everybody knows more or less what is meant by that. So let me try and do something a bit like that now. Once again, I was thinking out of chord shapes. So if I've got my F sharp minor here, I've got all of these kind of licks coming out of that chord shape, out of the F sharp minor pentatonic scale. Likewise with E. Various ways of embellishing that chord. And then when the chord progression went to the A, I was just kind of playing out of this C-form shape, which is a very kind of Hendrix-y thing to do. So there I was going into this E shape, and then for G, again in this C-form kind of a grip. So that lick think is straight out of Hendrix. It's kind of Wind Cries Mary or something, that particular lick. This one's another really simple part. This time I'm going for something that's maybe a little bit more indie and shoegaze sound. It's a little bit more effecty as well, and that's another choice you've got. I mean, with a backing track like this, you can go quite classic and keep it quite rootsy, or you can maybe try a few effects pedals, get some more atmospheric sounds going on. So that's what I'm going to try and do with this particular part. I was doing with this one is just playing single notes on the B string, a little bit of tremolo picking just to get that kind of shoegaze sound, and then you add in some delay and suddenly you've got quite an atmospheric guitar part. Really, really simple, just trying to find notes along the length of the B string that sounded good. So mostly that's going to be chord tones. So something like that. So I'm starting off on this A note, so the minor third of the F sharp minor, going to the major third of the E. So that's the root of the F sharp, the root of the E. There are lots of notes that can sound good, and you can kind of develop your part like that. And then of course as soon as you put on a little bit of delay, it all comes to life. So I'm going for something a bit twangy and surfy with this next part. Lots of reverb, tremolo. You always get kind of instant atmosphere when you use those things. So let me do that. My part was once again pretty simple. I just came up with this kind of twangy low riff, just played on the low E string, mainly just based around the root notes of the chords. So F sharp and E, and then following the bass line here, A going down to the G sharp, and then I ended with this arpeggio phrase. Something like that. So quite busy, but that might work again depending on the context. If there are no vocals on that particular chord change, you can get away with something that kind of sticks out like that, and it's got quite a nice syncopated rhythm to it. Simple part, this one, and I'm using a vibrato effect. It's not an effect that's to everybody's taste, but I do really like it, and it does add an interesting texture to this song. I think the part itself is really simple, just double stops, and I'm mainly using tenths here, so the interval of a tenth, which is basically a third plus an octave. So I was starting off with this shape here. It's an F sharp on the 5th string and an A on the 2nd string, so that's the root and the minor third of that F sharp minor chord. Moving this down to an E and a G sharp, the root and the third of the E chord. And then you can really move that shape around. So something that I like doing, using these kind of tenth shapes. It always works. It's nice and minimal, but it creates a nice, interesting part. What about if you want to take the song in more of an edgy kind of a direction? You might be in that rehearsal and the singer comes in with this song and you think, man, it's just this kind of lame, strummy MOR thing. What I'm going to do is just play some noisy fuzz guitar all over it, and then something like this might happen. So maybe that's a little bit much for this track. I don't know. I actually quite like it. I quite like the contrast of the gentle acoustic strumming with that kind of noisy fuzz over the top. So I was trying to play, you know, a little bit more kind of freely and wildly, I suppose, on this one, but still keeping it quite simple. So really just kind of root notes, kind of chordal accents, and then some little pentatonic fills. And then when the song hits that A chord, just playing a little melody on the B string, but with some other droning strings in there, just to make it a bit kind of messier and noisier. So I'm going to do some volume swells now, so taking more of an atmospheric, countryish kind of approach. So let's hear how that sounds. I do love volume swells, and they're pretty easy to do. You're basically just striking the strings of the guitar with the volume all the way off, and then gradually bringing in the volume, either using the volume knob on the guitar, or today I'm actually using a volume pedal. And as far as the actual notes I'm playing, I'm really just trying to outline the chords of this tune. So triads, as always, are very useful. So you could just go through the chords using some simple triad shapes. So F sharp minor to E, swelling in each of those triads. You can go through different triad inversions as well. I was also doing some country bending ideas, so things like this. So I do love these kind of country bends, really trying to bend into the chord tone. So if I'm playing over the F sharp minor, kind of bending up into the root of that chord, or here hitting the third of the E chord. So super effective, those kind of country bends. We could go acoustic on this one, and just because there's already an acoustic guitar on the backing track doesn't mean we can't add another acoustic guitar. So that's what I'm going to do now, and I'm going to try and play it in a slightly different style to the strummy acoustic track which is already there. for a nice simple arpeggiated pattern here. I'm playing fingerstyle, and the fingerstyle pattern that I'm using is stolen directly from the Serge Gainsbourg Melody Nelson album that I looked at a couple of weeks ago in a video, and I really like this fingerstyle pattern. I think it works quite well in this situation. I'm just playing on the top 4 strings, so with the F sharp minor, just playing frets 4, 2, 2 and 2, and the pattern is this. So starting on string 2, 2, 3, 4, 1, 4, 2, 3, 4. Really nice kind of rolling pattern. Just take that through the chords of the song. And change inversion. So on this one, maybe some clean melodic arpeggios, maybe go for a bit of a Johnny Marr-ish kind of a vibe. So here, just trying to come up with a nice melodic kind of a part. Again, just outlining the chords really. I started off with this chord, which is that F sharp minor, but it's got the 2 open top strings as well. And then a little connecting melody to connect to the E chord. So I thought that was a reasonably nice melodic kind of idea. And then for the A chord, so kind of using these 6 shapes, but I've got an open B string in there just for a bit of extra jangle. So there we are, that's it for this video. That was a really enjoyable process coming up with those 10 guitar parts. Probably some of those guitar parts more successful than others, but this is really just about experimenting and exploring and finding the parts that you prefer. There's no right or wrong here, and certainly in a studio situation, people aren't always going to agree on what is the best part for a song. So I think you need to kind of swallow your ego here. If somebody hates one of the parts you come up with, just move on to the next idea until you hit upon something that everybody is liking. I will be tabbing out all 10 of my guitar parts. I'll put those tabs up on my Patreon page. My backing track will also be up there if any of you fancy either playing some of my guitar parts or coming up with some further parts of your own. Thanks a lot for watching, and I will see you next time.